Oh, there we go. Now we're recording. Okay. So welcome to the eMINTS Reconnection Spring Webinar Series. Today's topic we're going to be discussing is Prosocial Classrooms and You. So welcome to everyone that is joining us today and for everyone that is going to be listening to the webinar recording. So our rundown today is that we are going to spend about 60 minutes together. We're going to learn various tools and resources that are going to help at any grade level in any content area. And although we are going to move briefly through the resources, we will make sure that you have practical tips and advice for including these into your own daily practice. So also, if you have questions or thoughts on additional tips or ways that this might integrate into what you do, please feel free to share your thoughts as well, as we want this to be as interactive as possible. So, introducing the powerful team that we have here today. I am Jen Foster. I am an eMINTS instructional specialist. I am a former K-12 teacher, and I've been working with eMINTS for about 12 years now. And then next on the slide is Haley Anderson. I'll let Haley introduce herself.
Hello, friends. I'm Haley Anderson. I am also an eMINTS instructional specialist, and I started in August of last year, so I'm pretty fresh out of the classroom. My classroom experience includes 6 through 12 English and Spanish teaching. And then our last but not least, we have...
Find my unmute button. All right, so I am Nikki Schwartz. I'm also an eMINTS trainer. I was a past former 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teacher, and I was an educational technology specialist and a library media specialist. So I've done a little bit of everything. Worked within a small rural district, a larger rural district, and then I was in Columbia Public Schools. So I joined eMINTS in August of 20 years ago almost. I had to think.
So we're doing this reconnection webinar series in hopes that we can restore connection with each other and reconnect with our colleagues and our passion. We're hoping to reestablish a bond of communication or emotion, because we really do feel like some of that is missing at the current point in time, especially in public education. We're hoping that these reconnection webinars will bring us all together again and help us reignite our passion for learning and teaching. Today, we're going to share 8 tools with you that are going to help facilitate pro-social education in the classroom.
All right, and then just to kind of get started and to think about where these can fit in, as you reflect maybe over this year, the past couple of years, we know have been really trying in the classroom. What are some of the obstacles that you or maybe other teachers might be facing? You can share those in the chat, or you can just open up your mic and feel free to talk.
I'll start. I think that we as classroom teachers sort of face on some level working in silos, and so not being able to collaborate or connect with our colleagues. And also there's a sense in discussing with my colleagues that students are presenting more challenging, I don't know, they're more challenging than they have been in the last 18 years of teaching. There's something different about today's student than there was even of students 5 years ago.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we've heard. That's even something coming out of the classroom. I mean, less than 5 years ago, I remember the last thing I said was, it's not the same as it was when I started, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It's a completely different ballgame now.
I think a lot of that maybe stems from COVID and quarantine. Kids are traumatized in a way that we haven't ever seen before. And those behaviors that we're seeing now, I think, kind of stem from that.
I think that it was getting kind of rough right before then, and it just didn't help once we had to go into isolation and everything. I think it just really amplified all of that.
And I will add that I think that we have been implementing some teaching practices prior to COVID that have directly led to a lot of the behavior problems that we are seeing in the classrooms. COVID exacerbated them. They made it very obvious that they exist. But I think that some of the things that we need to get back to some of the practices that are good for students that we know are proven effective. So some of those practices are things that we're going to actually discuss today. All right, so one of the first things we're going to talk about is what is prosocial education? It's kind of an unfamiliar term for a lot of educators. However, the term has been around for a little over 50 years. So prosocial is really just the opposite of antisocial. So we're looking at prosocial education being the intentional focus on how teachers interact with their students. We're actively working to create kinder humans. We're looking at ways to increase the level of engagement in learning in the classroom. And a lot of these things are things that we're seeing, a lot of teachers are seeing as challenges to learning in the classroom today. So we're looking at building that classroom culture where teachers and students feel really valued and respected. Teachers are actively teaching the students how to behave and why they should behave this way. I hear a lot of times that teachers say things like, well, they're in this grade, they should know better by now, or they're this old, they should know better by now. However, how often have they actually had someone, an adult, sit down and explain to them, this is what you need to do, and this is why, and provide them with a valid reason to help them understand why we're asking them to do these things. And so that's a really big piece of the prosocial classroom. And then on top of that, we also really try and focus on the positives. A lot of research has been coming out of classrooms, and in many cases, there's 9 negative things spoken in the classroom to every 1 positive thing that is spoken in the classroom. So it's very heavy on the negative. And as you can imagine, that negativity really weighs down on everybody, the teacher included, whenever there's such a heavy focus on the negative. And so it's a really challenging mindset to flip, but that is one thing that we do work on, is changing that and setting that positive tone. So that's really what prosocial classrooms is all about, is really putting yourself into that positive mindset, focusing on and trying to recognize the positive things that we see, and then helping students to understand how and why we want them to behave the way we want them to. So with that, there are 4 pillars of prosocial education, and I will turn that over to Haley to give us a little bit more information about those.
So the 4 most major pieces or pillars of prosocial education include inductive discipline, praise, teacher-student relationships, and the emotionally upbeat classroom. And this can look a little bit different in every classroom. It's really not a one-size-fits-all. It's not a curriculum. It's humanizing everybody in the classroom. When it comes to inductive discipline, it is finding the teaching moment, figuring out why a student is behaving the way that they are, and de-escalating situations that could have led to discipline infractions. And that in turn helps strengthen relationships with your students. When it comes to praise builds intrinsic motivation. It replaces tangible rewards, and it also strengthens relationships with students. That is one of the easiest, praise is one of the easiest strategies you can use with students to build a relationship with them. For teacher-student relationships, students don't learn from people they don't like. So building that relationship first leads to academic outcomes, positive academic outcomes with students. It reduces unwanted behaviors, having that relationship as a foundation, and it leads to higher levels of engagement, which then we know as educators that makes our job better. It makes our job satisfaction a lot higher when our students are engaged. And finally, with the emotionally upbeat classroom, students do the work of learning. Teachers facilitate learning experiences, but we're kind of the guide on the side, and students practice getting along with each other. It's a joyful experience that we all like to have together.
So thinking about those 4 pillars that we've built, classrooms need to have a little piece of each of those in order to build that successful pro-social classroom. You can't have the pro-social classroom without one of those really critical pillars. So maybe which of those 4 pillars of pro-social education might you be the most interested in learning? Or is there one there that you're like, I already do that, or I feel like I do that really well? Is there something there that kind of speaks to you? And this can also be done in parenting as well. I turn around and yes, use this at home on my own family, even in any relationship, quite honestly, it can be used. Friendships, you know, husband, wife, partner, whatever, you can use this with anybody.
Yeah, I was thinking that, Nikki. So I'm your colleague at the university, so I'm not in the classroom, but I do think about that in parenting and even in my relationship with my husband, and like not focusing as much on the negatives, because like a lot of times when we're having issues, that's when we're communicating about them. But when we experience something positive, we don't always draw attention to that. And so that has been like an intentional thing that I've been trying to do more of in our lives.
Yeah. And these are really great strategies and can help to build those relationships and build those in. So definitely excited to show you guys how you can utilize these in all of your relationships.
I also think it's a snowball effect. The more that you look for the good, the more good there, it just keeps going. You know, the more you are able to look for the good, and the more good you find, and the more good you feel, and the more good you see. So it makes me feel good to look for the good.
Yeah, and also with as much interaction as we do virtually, it is very challenging to gain a lot of understanding about expressions and emotions through text messages, through a lot of virtual communications. And so having a focus on the positive and presuming that people are coming from a good place definitely helps with those virtual communications as well. All right, so moving on to pillar 1, inductive discipline. This is the first pillar of pro-social classrooms, simply because it's the one that takes the most effort to change. We were not raised in an inductive discipline type of society. There's a very heavy focus on power assertion because we were most of us were raised in a generation where we did something whenever our parents told us because they told us so. Like, because I said so is a very common phrase that was utilized whenever we were children. It's one that I still tell my children from time to time, although it's not particularly effective. It is once you start to lose a little bit of power. Now that I have a 22-year-old, whenever I say because I said so, it's not as powerful as it was whenever he was only 2. I can't use that power assertion all the time. So inductive discipline, though, is where you actually provide an explanation, a reasonable, legitimate explanation as to why you want somebody to behave and how you want them to behave. So it is actually a very highly effective approach to discipline. It is much more effective than power assertion or some of the other types of discipline that we use. So really, discipline is that teaching moment. We're trying to help kids understand how they should behave and why. And when we use inductive discipline, and we're really proactive with what our expectations are and telling them, this is what we're going to be doing. This is how I expect you to behave. This is why you need to behave this way. They're much more willing to comply with it. As adults, we're the same way. If somebody says, hey, I need you to do this because this might happen if it's not done the right way, then we're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I'll do it that way. And it's not a problem. But a lot of kids don't trust that we always have their best interest at heart. So they need that why. We're no longer raising the robots that are working in factories anymore. We're raising generations now of humans that we're training to question everything because we want them thinking critically. We want them problem solving. We don't want them mindlessly going to a factory job anymore and doing what their boss says because he said so. We want them to try and solve those problems and be really creative in their thinking. And in doing that, we don't have that the kid going to school, sitting in their desk and doing everything that the teacher says just because that's the teacher and that's the thing you're supposed to do. So we're having to approach things slightly differently with this new generation of people that we have been raising. So again, it's providing a valid reason to help them understand. When they have that better understanding, they're more apt to apply that to other situations. So whenever they understand, hey, I shouldn't run out in traffic whenever I'm right in front of the school building, then later on in life, whenever they're getting ready to cross another street, maybe they'll think, wait a second, I should maybe not run out in traffic because I could possibly get run over by a car. So they can take what they're learning in school and apply it to new situations, to other classrooms, to real world applications. So we're teaching them so that they can be the ones in control of their own behavior and not have to be reliant on other people to manage their behavior.
So moving into that, finding out the why, that is one of the most vital things that you can do with this student, because it really truly is getting to the root of the problem. There are so many behaviors right now, and there are days, I spent days thinking like that was the only thing I spent my day on. I felt like I walked out of the classroom exhausted because I was like, I don't even know that I taught today. It just felt like a discipline day. But while you're going through working with a student on discipline, rather than just telling them to stop and expecting it to happen, because what happens is you tell them to stop, 2 seconds later, it starts up again. And then you're telling it. So then you're in a cycle, complete cycle of it going. Now, you might have to continually have the conversations with them about why this is not a behavior that's appropriate, but eventually giving them that why over and over again is important. That is going to resonate with them more than just stop. And really thinking to how you can get to the root of the problem. So the first thing is to think about it as a help me understand. Take time to listen to them. If it's truly disrupting the classroom, pull them aside and chat with them. I would pull students on the way to specials. We would just sit down. I had a girl burst out in tears because she had some stuff going on at home. And had I not done that, her behaviors just would have continued in my classroom. And she was one of the girls that could turn all the girls against you. And that's what she would do in my classroom. But me talking to her and pulling her aside, it allowed us to open up that line of communication. And then really watch your body language. And it's important to teach your students about this too when you're doing it. You know, crossed arms, not smiling, it makes them think they're in trouble. But if you're coming at them with that open body language and nodding and smiling, it shows that you're trying to truly seek to understand what they're going through. So really trying to also teach them at the same time, that's a really important piece that you can give them. And then expressing concerns, that's trying to help the student understand how others are feeling, but not in a negative or a harsh tone. You want to stay very neutral and keep it as a teaching moment. So it's that victim-centered induction, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. It's think about how so-and-so would feel if you were to do that to them. I had one where they didn't care about what happened maybe to someone in their class, but the second that you said, well, what if someone did this to your cousin in kindergarten and they loved that cousin fiercely? And so they were like, oh no, that would not fly. And it was like a light bulb moment. And then the last one might seem kind of silly, but if you think about it, I think about this in terms of like, if I do this at home, why don't I do this at school? involve the student in the solution. Sometimes they might say, I just need to sit away from this particular student. I need to not be by them in line because I can't handle them. I had this happen with 2 of my students. There was orange juice chucked across my classroom. It was not a good situation, but we talked about it, and he said, I just can't be near him. He just gets my blood boiling. Cool. We came up with a plan together. I let the specials teachers know that those 2 students needed to not be near each other. It helped us avoid confrontations between the 2 students, and it kept the eruptions in my classroom well down to a minimum. There were times when it would happen, but it was on them then, and they knew that. So we were able to talk, and we were able to come up with a solution together. And that really helped that relationship building, because they saw that I was taking time out to help them work through a problem versus just being like, well, then you just are going to miss recess, or you're going to miss this. So that was really important for them.
And so Nikki mentioned victim-centered induction, which is the focus of the attention of the misbehaving student on his or her victim. And Nikki gave a great example. Maybe they don't care about their classmate and can't put themselves in their classmate's shoes, but the instant that light bulb clicks and it is someone that they care about, then it does make sense. So first, point out how the student's misbehavior affects others. So, I gave my husband an example yesterday. Say I did something to hurt you, where students in a class, our teacher might say to me, whatever action you have done hurt Tyler for this reason. Can you how would you feel if Tyler had done that to you? Then you ask the student to imagine being put in the other's place, right? And if they can't, try it with someone else, someone that they care about, a younger sister, a parent, a grandparent, or their best friend who may not be one of their classmates. And then suggest concrete acts of reparation. And as Nikki mentioned in the last slide, it does really help to involve the student. Like, hey, so-and-so, this hurt your classmate. What can we do to repair that relationship? How can we make this, maybe not correct it, but how can we make this better again? And get their input for what might help rebuild a relationship.
So one of the really big pieces about victim-centered induction is that this is helping students to build empathy and develop empathy for other people. Especially younger kids, they're very, very self-centric. And so as they get older, one of the things that they need to learn to develop is empathy for other people. They're not getting a good, solid understanding of empathy a lot of times. And so then we see young adults that don't have empathy for other people. And that is a problem because those are skills that they should be learning and developing throughout their childhood and adolescence. So helping to do these kinds of activities where they're putting themselves in other people's shoes, they're starting to understand how their actions impact other people so they can develop empathy for others. So that moves us into pillar 2, which is on praise. And praise is just a social reward. It's a warm expression of approval, and it can be given verbally or non-verbally. And so some examples of nonverbal, a high five, a fist bump, a pat on the back, a warm smile, any of those kinds of things, just something to show your approval, your warm approval or expression of approval. And praise is actually one of the most powerful motivation tools that teachers can use when used effectively. It not only motivates students to behave better, but it can also motivate and enhance their academic achievement. So it's providing that feedback and encouragement. It's the same thing with adults. A lot of these strategies work for adults as well. And this is one of them. When adults are told, hey, you've done a good job on something, then they're more willing to try harder the next time. So when they hear good things, they try and do more good things. And so it's also one of the most effective ways for reducing common misbehavior problems. It's that, remember we were talking about the focus on the positive. So we have 9 negative comments to every 1 positive comment spoken in a lot of classrooms. And when we can get that closer to every time there's a negative, there's a positive spoken, we see dramatic increases in improvements in behavior and academics, especially for students that are at risk and have special challenges.
So nonverbal praise is just as effective as verbal praise, because we have actually, there was a study that I recently read where they compared classrooms that used verbal and nonverbal, and they were still seeing the same results. Nonverbal praise is really great. I mean, you can kind of use it in those normal situations, assemblies, during a test. I always thought about like during standardized testing, like you couldn't say anything to the kids, but you knew which kids needed a pep talk along the way, but you couldn't really say anything. So it's like you could thumbs up, or you could, connect eyes with them and give them a smile. Some students get really uncomfortable with verbal praise also. There's adults that don't like verbal praise. Like it's sometimes people just have a really hard time accepting it. So this is a non-threatening way to do that. And you can give these nonverbal praises, can be very small. It doesn't have to be anything very big. It can be like snaps. You can even teach this to your kids to where they're able to give nonverbal praise in your classroom, giving snaps, giving claps to their classmates whenever they do something in class. And it makes you feel good. You kind of think about if you speak and people clap after you're done, like it's very exciting. It makes you feel good. It's same thing with kids. There was one that I was listening to. They talked about how there was a kid who would not meet their eyes in class. This kid would not make eye contact with them. It was something that they were building on. And so the teacher started doing nonverbal praise with them. And the kid then was seeking out eye contact from that teacher because they knew that they could get nonverbal praise when they made that eye contact with her.
So I'm going to share with you a tool. It's a way for you to provide online verbal feedback to students. It is called Vocaroo, and I have included the link at the bottom. It is open sourced. It does not collect any login information at all. I didn't even have to log in when I tried it. You record via the web page, and it generates a unique URL, and that you can paste wherever you would like to for students to listen to the verbal feedback that you have given to them. And so I tried it out, and I recorded an example of verbal feedback for you all. So everybody mute your mic. Jen clicked on it here. And I guess Jen could share the verbal feedback that I recorded, or we can do it independently, whichever is most beneficial for all of us in our webinar today.
Participation in today's activities. Thank you for your attendance, your engagement, and your participation in today's activities. We so appreciate your efforts and enthusiasm.
So that's really all it is. There's a record button. You push record, don't have to log in. It gives you a URL, and you can paste the URL wherever you want it to be.
All right, thank you. So moving on to pillar 3, this is teacher-student relationships. And if you remember back to the diagram of the pillars earlier, both praise and inductive discipline both support the formation of teacher-student relationships. So teacher-student relationships are really essential to classroom management practices, and they can dramatically increase student engagement. Because again, the quote that she said earlier, kids don't learn from people they don't like. That holds true for adults as well. it's a struggle whenever if there's any kind of contention in the relationship to want to comply with anything they're asking. So anytime you can work to build those relationships, the learning is going to happen at a quicker rate, and the learning is going to go deeper because the students are going to be more willing to engage in the activity for longer periods of time. They're going to try harder. They're going to be more willing to struggle through challenging activities, just because they like their teacher and have a good relationship with the teacher. So whenever we can build those relationships first, we're going to have higher quality learning happening. But there's great benefits for teachers as well in building those strong relationships with students. Teachers and students both are happier and healthier. We see lower levels of stress, anxiety, depression, lower blood pressure rates, lower use of risky behaviors for students. We see fewer off tasks and disruptive behaviors. But then we also, for teachers, when teachers have better relationships with their students, they actually implement better teaching practices. Research has shown that they're implementing problem-based learning, inquiry-based learning, all those kinds of activities, because they feel like their kids are more willing to engage when they put in the effort to do those kinds of, those are big projects that take a lot of planning and work by the teacher. And when they know, hey, I got these kids, they're great kids and they're going to work really hard on that, their teachers are more willing to put in that effort, knowing that their kids are going to reciprocate that effort and they're going to put forth the work to accomplish the learning in those kinds of classrooms. Sorry, I can't find my mouse. Here we go. Okay.
All right, so along.org is a really great relationship building website. It is completely free. It is a free website for teachers. And I have linked everything there to where it takes you directly. They have a lot of resources that are free within their website, but I have linked like the quick getting started ones for you so you don't have to sift through it. By clicking on the getting started checklist, you can see the step-by-step process that happens there. It's great. It gives you the slide deck for introducing it to your students, as well as the consent form if your students are under the age of 13. They are FERPA and COPA compliant, but they did want to put the permission slip out there for you to send that home if you would like to. Once you've gone through the sign-in process, you can link it to their Google Classroom. It can go, that's how you can put your students in with it, or you can enter them manually. They have some different resources within there. And the really neat thing about it is they give you question decks, and you can choose the deck that you're kind of wanting information from. It can be just kind of fun little questions, or it can be serious questions. So it just kind of is a mix up, and you can choose which ones you want to use. You choose a question and you have it go to the students, like it assigns it to them. The really great thing about it is that they do not see each other's responses. So the teacher can see the students, they can respond through video, audio, or text. So whatever platform they're comfortable with. Only you can see their responses, and that's it. If your students have multiple teachers, so if you are like an upper grade teacher, or if your students switch classes, your students can only belong to one teacher. There is a reason for this. I spoke with them about this because I was really curious as to, what we could do. And it makes a lot of sense after talking to them. And they said that it's really important that students build that connection with one adult in the building. Even if, let's say the smartest one to go with would be to use like your homeroom if you were, in upper grades. And if you were doing that, if you maybe had a student in there that you maybe didn't have a great relationship with, this is your chance to build that relationship with them. It's a way that you can go in and just, they're fun questions that they don't have to do with content. It's just for fun. And the other thing is you can see the best time to use that question and what it can help students with. So you can kind of see what ulterior motive that you're getting to with it by going into those. And the 3 on there are just some examples of different cards that they have. There are also classroom activities that you can do with your students. They range from like 30 minutes, 10 minutes. So they're great for morning meetings. They're great for days you just need your students to like reconnect with each other. But you can see the time and the objective when you click on it. And then you download the resource. It's all completely free, these activities that they have put together. It was listed on Time's Best Inventions of 2022 list. So they're a really unique company, and they have the best, I would say, interest in student-teacher relationship whenever they created this.
And another strategy for building teacher-student relationships is that I have found significantly effective is using attendance questions. For example, is a thumb a finger? If you could have any superpower, what would it be? Is water wet? So how this would work is you would pose the question and use it to take attendance. So as you would say one of your students' names, they would respond to the attendance question so that you know that they're there. So this helps build student relationships because you learn names quickly. This is one strategy to use. I had 120 students' names down in a week because I used attendance questions, because I said their name, they responded, and I looked at them and I used their names as quickly as I could, or as often. I learned their names as quickly as I could and used them as often as I could during that first week. So learn students' names quickly, say names often, have questions with short answers so that you can take attendance. I didn't use this, but just the first week, once I got the students' names down, then I didn't really feel it was necessary anymore. It did take quite a lot of time that first week. But after that, I had students who would request or suggest other attendance questions that we hadn't already done because they loved it so much. Because the answers or the questions just led to a facilitation of a discussion, and it helps you get to know your students. It helps you build relationships with students. Yeah, so honestly, highly, highly recommend attendance questions. What are some other attendance questions that you might ask to students? Doesn't matter the grade level. What ideas do you have? You can do an open mic if anybody has any other ideas. I also have linked, sorry, I'll stop talking in just a second. I also have linked a pretty extensive list of examples in the bottom of this slide that you will have too. So if you need some more ideas, there's some there. But let me stop talking. What other ideas might you have for attendance questions you could ask to learn names?
I saw Tiffany's here in the chat. I liked her. Sometimes it was relevant to what they're doing. What's your favorite cell organelle and why? So going with content, and then sometimes being random as like, what's your favorite candy bar? My students loved Would You Rathers. They would request to come up with those. Those were always really fun too. These are good for around the dinner table or going to bed at night too, if you're like doing this with your family.
These are great ideas. Thank you all for sharing your ideas. Again, there is a
Apple or Android. That would cause some arguments in that classroom.
There is a link to some more in the bottom of this slide. So should you feel inclined, and
we'll call them healthy discussions.
Thank you, Haley. That just knowing students' names, many of us, I like Tiffany. I know Tiffany works in a small school and we see these same kids, but calling students by their name and their correct name, the correct pronunciation of their name is really, really important. And that is a huge relationship piece. And unfortunately, we do have lots of kids that outside of the school day don't hear their name spoken. And we can have kids that even in small schools, they're the really quiet, well-behaved kids that go all day and can be unrecognized by a teacher. So speaking their names every day and being really intentional about it is a huge way to help build relationships quickly in the classroom. Yes, Tiffany, go ahead.
This year, just, coming out of COVID and everything, I've seen so many just students who are so more withdrawn than I've ever seen students. And so that's something that this summer I decided that, because we were kind of switching up the way we were doing our morning duty. And instead of having just a small group of like 20 kids in my classroom, then I was going to be supervising a lot more kids just one day a week. And so I decided just the first week of school, I thought every day I'm going to say every student's name as they walk up. So, you know, even if there's another teacher standing there, every single student that walks by me, you know, I speak their name. And there's one boy that moved in 8th grade, and right now I only teach 6th and 7th. And he just looked at me like, how do you know my name? But I, you know, even like if the secretary, I have this program that I send out to all the teachers when we have new students move in. And, you know, so I see all of their names, and then I can like, oh, that's the new kid, that must be so-and-so or whatever. And it is unbelievable how many are just like, oh, hey, Miss Gray, how are you? And I kind of thought, oh, this will spill over and some of the other teachers will do it. But it's some adults, and it's just a difference in people. But some adults are like, oh, I see an adult, I'm going to talk to that adult. And it's like they see dozens of kids walk by and they don't see dozens of kids walk by. And that's just something that's really been kind of heavy on my heart this year. Like, these kids need to be seen. These kids need to know. And that's why years ago I started that question of the day, because like you said, it helped me learn their names, but it helped me learn something about them. And like, you know, I have a kid that loves Johnny Cash and Days of Our Lives. And I would not have known that without my question of the day. And that day it was, you know, last year. And I said, hey, what are you going to do? What plans do you have over Labor Day weekend? He goes, I'm probably just going to watch Days of Our Lives. And I about peed my pants. And I was just like, I don't even know how to answer that, but that's awesome. And, you know, I mean, but it was just, it's a way for me to connect with kids and to show the kids that we have commonalities with everyone, not just the ones in our friend group or whatever. And I have a student this year who is has selective mutism and have never had that before. And I have another student who probably doesn't speak 5 words a week in class. And so I'm actually in the ECHO ProSocial group through the university and have done case studies on them. And, you know, and I'm learning a lot about it. But with my nonverbal girl, the one with selective mutism, when I'm asking the question, I just hand her a little slip of paper. And so yesterday it was, you know, tell me something fun or interesting you did over the 4-day weekend, because we're on a 4-day week now. And she said, I got a new cat. And so before I get to her name, I'll just go over and grab her slip of paper, and then I can share her response. So it gives the other kids an opportunity to know her, not just me, because she doesn't communicate with them. So anyway, sorry to take so much time.
No, those are fantastic examples of why it's so important, and how a few little changes can quickly transform the way that we treat students and the way students feel when they walk in our doors. So I appreciate that, Tiffany.
Thank you so much, Tiffany, for sharing that.
So pillar 4 is the emotionally upbeat classroom. And this is kind of, there's things you can do to create an emotionally upbeat classroom, but without having solid teacher-student relationships, without using praise and focusing on positives, and without really utilizing inductive discipline, you're probably not going to see this pillar really thrive and grow. So it's kind of the culmination of the pieces coming together, but it is really focusing on those positives. It's making sure that you're treating your students with trust and respect. That is something that goes back to that inductive discipline. When we provide them with a reasonable explanation of why we need them to do something and how we want them to do it, that communicates respect to them. Like, I respect you enough as a human that I'm going to explain this to you. And then also having clear expectations also really communicates that we value our students, because we're able to say to them, hey, like, this is what the expectation is. And now they're not having to guess, because so many times we tell them we want them to do something and then they struggle to follow through because they don't know exactly how to get there. But if we can communicate that early on, then it clears up a lot of those confusions and you'll get rid of a lot of the misbehaviors and a lot of those little common misbehaviors, off task things. They do those because they're not really clear a lot of times on what it is that they should be doing and how they should be doing them. So I will turn this over to
Me. So one of the best things that happens in a classroom, I think, is infusing humor. I was big on sarcasm, but I had relationships built with my kids to where I could have that in the classroom. And it wasn't mean sarcasm, it was fun sarcasm. And they got me, and I knew who I could do it with and I knew who I couldn't. Students use humor, and you want to embrace that. They do it in order to help each other feel better. We see it all the time, like when they're trying to joke around with their friends who are, having a rough day, or they even use it to cope themselves. Like, how many times have we seen the class clown in the class? And usually that class clown is also just that student is at school every single day. They are, but they're doing it as a coping strategy. A lot of times they're struggling academically. They're having a hard time making friends. There's things going on at home. So they're coming to school where they can just be a different person. It shows that playful teasing actually strengthens social bonds. So just having like that playful banter, you think about like people, like your friends that you're close with, you have inside jokes, you have like little funny things that you do. It's the same thing with kids. When you can have like those funny little moments with them and you can put it into your classroom, it just shows that you're human. It shows that you like to have a good time. And it just kind of loosens them up a little bit and makes them feel warmth whenever they come into your room. Now, there are some teachers that find this really uncomfortable, and that's okay. You don't have to infuse a huge, like, you're not a comedian, you're not a magician, you don't have to go up and like pull out all the props and the bunnies and all that stuff to like come out and teach. It's just those little things that you can do, and just those maybe little inside jokes that you have with kids. Writers love knock-knock jokes. You pull out a knock-knock joke for them. It's just those little things that they enjoy. Usually with my lessons, I don't know, I always like to use like little video clips or like photos to kind of get them started. This resource that I linked here at the bottom is classhook.com. I put the little thing, you can get away with the free version. You don't need to like do a paid version for this. You can get 20 videos a month. It's more than enough. The great thing about it is you can search by like your genre. You can search by topic. You can search by a vocabulary word, which I thought was interesting, by your standards, and it will pull video clips for kids for you to like teach, like put it as like your introduction into like your lesson. And it's literally on everything. It's really fun. And you can use those, and I don't use like the live discussion rooms or the student assignments. I just get the videos and like into my lessons. But it's just a fun way to accept that humor. Like, let kids be funny and acknowledge that they're funny. Just let them know there's a line. And a lot of times you have to like have that conversation with them, which is an inductive discipline kind of thing, where it's just like, okay, we can do a little bit of it, but we can't do a lot because then everybody's off task, so it's really teaching them. And that's important because they're going to go out into their lives and they have to understand when it's appropriate, when it's not appropriate.
All right, our last strategy today is a tool called AnswerGarden. And Jen's going to open this link, but just a minute, Jen, before you do. I'm also going to paste the same link into the chat so that all of you in here can add to this AnswerGarden and see how it works. So AnswerGarden is a word cloud generator. I've linked the main AnswerGarden page on the bottom. There, just like Vocaroo, it does not require any sign-ins at all. And it generates a unique link for each AnswerGarden that you make. So I've created an AnswerGarden today that in just 1 minute, Jen is going to click on. And also I'm asking our participants to click on it as well. You can add one word or phrase There is a 40 character limit, which you can change as you set one up. It's a 20 or 40 character limit, but you, that's per submission, but you can submit as many as you'd like. So with that being said, let's test it out. Click on that AnswerGarden. The link is in the chat. And our question for today is, list strategies to build relationships with students. So add some things that you might do already, or maybe some things that you want to try.
And it also will filter out bad words. You can have it do that because you know what's going to happen.
And so Jen has that tab open, and you'll notice that every time she refreshes, more submissions you will see. And when a submission is submitted more than once, it will grow bigger. And if Jen had put any responses in this AnswerGarden, those would turn blue. So the blue ones are the ones that you have submitted to the AnswerGarden, and the bigger ones are the ideas that have been submitted more than once. And as you can see, Jen hovers over the submissions, and the number that you'll see when she hovers over them is the number of times that those have been submitted. So that is AnswerGarden, a free tool that you could use for building an Upbeat classroom.
All right. Thank you for that. So our next Reconnection webinar, for any of you that are wanting to join us again in the future, is going to be on March the 22nd. We're going to meet at 4 p.m. And this time we are going to talk about DTI and place-based learning. So the DTI is our design through inquiry materials that we've been working on for the last few years, and they have some really cool activities planned for you guys there. The same registration link as we use this time. It's the bit.ly/eMINTS and then our final spring webinar is going to be in April on the 19th, and we'll be talking about learning and literacy, which will go along with a different grant that we're also running called Talk to Read. So if you're interested in those topics, I would highly encourage you guys to join us in the spring, or continue joining us in the spring.
Okay, the Summer Summit is our 4 days that we're going to have this summer in 4 different Missouri locations. We tried to spread them out throughout the state. We'll be in Warrensburg, Springfield, Columbia, and Farmington. It is $199 per person for a full day session. That includes lunch as well. So we'll make sure you're taken care of. But whenever you come to that, you will learn Prosocial Classrooms, and you'll get more of an activity of that in the morning. Then you'll have lunch, and then we'll actually take you through some design through inquiry in the afternoon and really show you how Prosocial classrooms are really important to doing design through inquiry, because your students have to have those solid relationships with you and with the students in order to do those DTI projects. And you can register for that at bit.ly/eMINTS summit. And definitely, talk to some friends, see if you can get some of them to come and join you.
And I just want to clarify before Jen moves on really quickly, it is the same session that will happen in each of the 4 different locations. We are going to design it together as an eMINTS team, and it will be the same presentation. It was designed specifically that way to meet the needs of anybody statewide, so you could pick the location that was most convenient for you. And I'm going to talk about the eMINTS tip cards, which I help to create and push out via social media. Every Tuesday, we push out a tip card, and we share them on all social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And you can find a full year. This is the 4th school year that we have created and produced and shared tip cards. You can find the full year worth of tip cards that are shared each July, and those are on our eMINTS portal. Yes.
And then just 3 more places where you can find resources. We have our eMINTS portal that Haley spoke about. You can find the tip cards and different resources through that, as well as the grants that we're working on. We have our emints.org website that you can go to in order to find out upcoming events that are going on and registration for those. And then you can also go to our new ProSocialEd.org website, where we are going into kind of a new phase of our ProSocial program that we're really excited about. So if you go to that site, you can stay up to date on what is coming up with us in ProSocial Ed.
And on this slideshow, each one of those images is a link that will take you out to those resources if you need help navigating to those. So thank you for coming. I appreciate all of your time. And again, we were trying to infuse a little bit of humor into our presentation with our Bitmojis. I do want to point out the extremely serious expression on my face as I am disco dancing here in the image. And then we just showing a little bit of personality and trying to wrap it up with a little humor at the end of the day. So thank you guys for your time. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. We just appreciate you being here this afternoon.
And if you need proof that you were here, feel free to click on that and a certificate will be sent to your email inbox.
All right. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you so much. Tiffany, it's good to see you, even though I saw you from across the gym last night.